Well, hopefully this brief on eco-innovation, on the European Eco-Innovation Programme today will give you a good sort of overview of what's happening on the funding arena within eco-innovation, and also give you the perspective of, perhaps through working with the Centre for Global Eco-Innovation, to see that actually this is not just a regional or national priority, but also a European priority. So obviously any opportunities you can explore within that area, both regionally, nationally, and on a European scale, are worthwhile the effort. So to start with eco-innovation, and I have noticed that description here, which is pretty much what Eco-Innovation Programme does, so that fits quite well. All forms of eco-innovation, reducing environmental impact and promoting resource efficiency, and that's essentially the core description of the program itself. So reducing the impact and also looking at resource efficiency. That's the two themes in terms of environmental policy at European level that are worth emphasizing here. The program as such is managed by the European Agency for Competitiveness and Innovation, called EACI. It is part of the CIP program, which is different from Framework Programme 7, which some of you might be familiar with. Framework Programme 7 looks at research and development opportunities. The CIP, Competitiveness and Innovation Programme, looks at market uptake. So that's sort of the next stage from FP7. And within eco-innovation, the wider definition, we're looking at new services, new products, new technologies, new processes, so quite a broad scale of activities. And the sort of underlying theme of the whole program is essentially, if it's good for business, it's good for the environment. So looking at environmental innovation, but in the context of market uptake. And market uptake is essentially how you need to see the program. It is a program to fund market uptake. It's not just environmental program. So just a few bullet points in terms of the main elements of the program. It supports innovative ideas which can be turned into marketable or commercial products and services. These products or these services often need incentives to penetrate the market, and that's what the program offers. The projects need to have a very clear potential for market uptake and market replication, and that is seen both in terms of sectoral replication but also geographical replication. So that's where the European element comes into play. The main principle of the program is to increase innovation capacities of SMEs. So SME presence and sort of SME engagement in projects is one of the very core elements, and I'll talk about that quite a lot today, this afternoon in particular. The budget is very modest for European funding, and the reason for that is this is a pilot program. That this has never been done before, so this is a pilot program where Europe is trying to see whether there's enough interest to get involved in market uptake type of projects. And this has worked pretty well with the modest budget of 200 million euros for the programming period, which is coming to an end at the moment. The program has managed to produce quite a good return on investment, and it will continue under Horizon 2020 with much larger budget, so that's good news for all of us, I would imagine. So how does it work? It's essentially a risk-sharing mechanism. So you get 50% of your total project costs to bring your product to market. And the key element in that is to remember is the fact that you actually need to start selling within the project, not after. No one is interested in what you're doing after the project. You're supposed to sell within the project length. So market orientation, market uptake, and the replication potential for your products and technologies, that's very important, and you have to essentially show that you know your market and you know how to approach it. It bridges the gap between research and development and commercialization. So it comes after prototype, after research, after development activities. Life cycle thinking is one of those core elements that are quite important, so you have to make sure you consider both the manufacturing or sourcing of your materials, manufacturing, and then consumption, but also recycling, reuse, and end of life cycle. It's fairly flexible, so unlike most of European programs, you're not required to have a set number of partners or countries involved. You could be just one single organization applying, or a few organizations from the UK, for example. But you have to remember that EU added value is very important. You have to show how your project refers or relates to the rest of Europe, and in particular the markets. And on average, project sizes sort of fall between 1 and 2 million euros as an average, but of course we've got many smaller and many larger projects as well. So in terms of the priorities, we've got 5 main priorities, but I have to say this is a bottom-up kind of program. So as long as you've got very clear environmental benefits, as long as the market potential, you're able to actually prove that there is market demand for your product, as long as it's innovative, you could propose any kind of product or technology. But these are mainly for guidance, and they don't have allocated budgets, so it's not like you're going to run out of money within one priority and then you're not going to get the funding. The best projects win. Materials recycling is the first priority, sustainable building products, food and drink sector, water, which is a relatively new priority, and greening business, which essentially means everything else. This year we've got a fairly limited budget because it's essentially a leftover of the program, 31.6 million euros, which is quite small compared to the budgets in the previous years, which means the competition will be tough. So only the best will survive, I'm afraid, but help is on the way, so fear not. Now, just let me tell you quickly about the main priorities and what's roughly included under the program. You can read all the details in the call document, which we can publicize the links to or send you the document to that, but that's essentially what it is. This is a brief description. So in terms of materials recycling, we're looking at improving quality of recycled materials. We're looking at better waste sorting processes, better treatment processes or methods. We're looking at innovative products which will use recycled materials, business innovations to improve competitiveness of recycling industries. The one element to remember is full coherence with the Waste Framework Directive, which essentially means you need to fall within there's a priority list for within Waste Framework Directive, what they prefer to fund rather than what's easiest to fund. So you have to try and focus whenever possible on recycling, reuse, rather than incineration, for example. Yes?
Most projects fit priority areas, or will other areas?
Most do, but most projects actually fit a number of areas as well. And they're not mutually exclusive in any way. So most projects will normally fall within 2-3 areas, which is absolutely fine. Any waste management and awareness raising projects which are focused on uptake in the public sector, that's not the program for that. This is a commercially minded, commercially focused program, so you're looking at SMEs rather than public sector in terms of SMEs or business sector. So anything focused on public sector needs to go to Liveplus program. Sustainable building products, we obviously all know the industry is not an example of a particular green industry, so there's a lot of focus to try and improve consumption of resources and the rate of recycling, in particular, also production of byproduct wastes. So we're looking here at a number of areas. If I can just draw your attention to a couple of them, use of bio-based materials in particular, and I know there are bio-minded businesses in the room, so you might be interested in that. Use of recycled and reused materials from construction and demolition waste, and also reduced use of raw materials. These are the sort of key elements here. Food and drink sector, again, not a very green one, in particular meat and dairy sectors. So we're looking here at cleaner and innovative products, and that would include packaging methods, that would include higher resource efficiency materials. We're looking at products and processes in the production and manufacturing processes or phase, in particular water efficiency. That's quite a sort of underlying theme in particular this year. But also looking at the consumption patterns and consumption elements of the chain, so innovative cleaner products, logistical solutions, distribution, purchasing decisions. Anything to do with sustainable farming practices is excluded from the program. That's this other program. There are other programs to fund that. Water is a new priority. Generally for Europe, water is a new priority, and there's increasingly a lot of money being put into the water sector at the moment. So we're looking here at water efficient processes, products and technologies, and those in particular which look at minimum 30% water reduction, water consumption reduction, water-free processes, innovative systems for water use and recycling, both for residential and industrial or urban uses. Water and wastewater treatment processes, and that also includes reduced use of chemicals, recovery of nutrients, and smart distribution systems, leakage detection and repair, pipe materials, all that area. And everything else. So we're looking here at design and implementation or manufacturing of products which should be in line with the eco-design and eco-label schemes. We're looking at substitution of materials with bio-based, for example. We're looking at industrial symbiosis, and we're also looking at remanufacturing and repair services. A few examples. I've brought a few brochures with me. These brochures are actually examples of projects from last year which have been funded. You might wish to have a look. If there's not enough copy, just drop me an email and I'll send you an electronic version of that. So Eco-TPU, which is a new bioplastic for sports shoes coming from oil plants. So effectively you're looking at replacing currently used materials. Production lines will be set up and started within the project, and the project involves footwear and chemical industries from Spain and Italy. The tile leather project, which looks at introducing chromium-free leather treatment, and that has got additional elements or benefits of reduced energy and wastewater pollution. Again, production line will be set up and started within the project. That involves, again, footwear industry from Spain and France. And it's clearly an innovative solution which has won a number of awards. This is just one of them. Green bottle, which is our own UK example of a project, which is a new type of milk bottle made from paper or recycled paper with very thin plastic lining, which is also recyclable. Complete supply chain consideration. There was an involvement of a number of partners along the supply chain. Setup of the production facility, and I believe they're actually available in Asda stores, at least in the south. That's where I purchased my little bottle. Glass Plus, which basically turns old TV screens into ceramics. The project has already started exporting to Canada and US, so that's an example also of the fact that you could be a European SME trying to target markets beyond Europe, and that's perfectly fine. And Leak Cure, which is pipe leaks detection and repair system, which has been proposed by an Israeli SME, and their first client is Thames Water in London, and the project is hugely successful at the moment. They're looking at further collaborations across Europe. And again, a shoe, you can see where I'm coming from and what's my hobby, obviously, a third shoe project, Second Life for Old Shoes, so essentially trying to find a way of recovering the materials or putting them back into the industry. Are there any questions so far? Right. Just to explain to you and for all of us to be clear where eco-innovation sits in terms of technology development stage. So you're looking at FP7 environment or FP7, generally FP7 program, research, technological demonstration, prototype development, that sort of activity. There's also other funding for that, which is the SMART Awards, for example, TSB SMART Awards, which are looking at proof of concept, proof of market, or prototype development kind of activities. Eco-innovation looks at the stage after that. So we're looking at market uptake specifically, be it the first market application, so you're trying to tackle the market for the first time, or market replication, so you've got a solution which is already on the market, it works, but you've decided or you've developed significant improvements to that, and you want to reintroduce it or say introduce it to a new audience or new target group. That would be your market replication. Again, comparison to other programs that you might be familiar with, just to sort of make sure that we all understand and remember. So eco-innovation is a post-research, post-development, first commercial deployment, or market demonstration, and obviously certain level of technical work such as adaptation for market uptake is still necessary, but that's absolutely fine and eligible. Intelligent Energy Europe is another program which often is compared to eco-innovation, but it's very different. As a matter of fact, eco-innovation does not include energy-focused projects, and I have to really stress that quite strongly, because we get a lot of energy projects every year to apply, in spite of the fact that they're completely ineligible for the program. So if your project is focusing on energy efficiency or energy saving as the main area in terms of environmental impact, that will not be eligible, because you will be competing with projects which look at materials, which look at water, which look at many other areas. You simply don't have a chance to get funded, aside from the fact that it's not eligible. So Intelligent Energy Europe, which is an energy-focused program, but again, it doesn't look at market uptake. It looks more at awareness raising and dissemination and training kind of activities within the energy sector. So it's quite important to sort of understand that difference. Liveplus, which I've already mentioned, looks at mainly public sector uptake, so it's not market driven in the same sense that eco-innovation is. And Liveplus is much wider in terms of dissemination, awareness raising, developing or proving environmental solutions, whereas with eco-innovation you actually have to get on the market within the project length. Right, who is eligible? Legal entities from the 27 or from the 1st of July, 28 member states, EFSA countries, plus the Balkans, Israel, and I think that's about it, yes. Emphasis is on SMEs, and I'll say that a number of times this afternoon, but essentially you have to have an SME in the consortium. If not leading, then at least a partner. That's absolutely necessary. In terms of capacity, you have to have the financial and technical capacity or expertise to implement the project. And as I said here, one partner in one country is formally sufficient, but EU added value is absolutely crucial. So you have to be sure that your solution is European enough if you want to go by yourself, European enough to actually target European market. This is the best program for SMEs, and I cannot stress that enough. We've got 81% private sector involvement, which is extremely high for European programs. 64% of them are SMEs, and I think out of the 64, 52 are micros, so quite small micro businesses, which is a testament again to how the program is structured and the application process and implementation is simplified to make sure that SMEs are not overwhelmed with the formal and legal requirements. So an ideal project, I'm yet to see one, but an ideal project should be innovative. So if you have any patents or any very clear IP situation on your project, that's always good to mention. But you have to prove that other people are not doing the same thing somewhere else. And here we actually encounter a lot of projects which bring technologies from New Zealand or America or Canada, saying, well, we could be doing that in Europe. Why don't I just apply for the funding? That's not enough. That's not enough because it's a simple knowledge transfer project, which Eco-Innovation is not. So there has to be an element of technical risk in the project and also very clear innovation aspect in terms of technologies developed in particular in Europe. The environmental policy objectives, European environmental policy objectives, there's lots of references in the call document as to which European environmental policies they're targeting. And they essentially boil down to the 5 priorities which I've mentioned. So you have to be sure that you refer to them and you actually understand how your project sits within the targets that Europe has sort of set out for itself. Increased competitiveness of European SMEs, which I've already mentioned, that's the core of the program, essentially. That's how they measured whether they're successful or not. So SME presence is absolutely mandatory. Significant environmental improvement, so you have to be realistic but ambitious in terms of environmental benefits. But at the same time, the market is essentially what wins the projects at this stage. This is the 6th call, the last call, very competitive, and it's the market potential that will win a grant. Demonstrating European added value in terms of market potential, so looking at market barriers and market potential or market share in other European countries, but also the level of European cooperation in the project. So if you've got European partners in your project, they shouldn't just be token partners, they should actually do something reasonable and useful. Be well formulated from technical and project management point of view. I'm sure you're familiar with that. That's a requirement across any program you will ever implement. It has to be well thought out and planned. And cost effective, so value for money. In terms of award criteria, there's 5 award criteria that the projects are assessed to, and we'll spend a fair amount of time this afternoon talking about those, but just to briefly outline them to you. Relevance of the actions, so looking at how your project sits within the program's objectives and how environmentally it fits in it, as well as the innovation aspect. Quality of proposed actions, so how well you've actually presented how you're going to implement the project. Impact on target audience, and that's impact from environmental point of view, but more importantly from market point of view. How will you actually approach the market, how you've identified market barriers, how you will sell, and what impact will that have on your economic performance as a business. Budget and cost effectiveness, so essentially you just need to make sure that costs are justified and well described. And European added value, which we've already mentioned, so looking at Europe as your market, but also looking at European partners as your collaborators. A slide on costs. That's quite important to know what's included, what's not. Typical staff categories that you will encounter in any other project, I would imagine. So you've got two types, direct costs and indirect costs. Direct costs look at staff costs, which are direct. That essentially means that they're based on actual salaries plus any mandatory payments, such as pensions, such as any social charges. Equipment, which typically tends to be quite a big chunk of the budget in eco-innovation projects, but that equipment needs to be depreciated, and it's only those bits that are directly with 5% of core tasks, of total budget, and not for core tasks, so not for project management. Travel, you can look at travel as a flat rate of 4% per project, or you can count individual trips and add them up. So there's 2 ways of doing that. and other specific costs, which could be any costs for patents or licenses or franchises or any dissemination materials or going to conferences or fairs or whatever you decide is necessary to promote your program, your product. But not electricity and gas, because they are included in your indirect costs, which is a flat rate of 7% of total eligible cost. I know it's low, but that's what you have to live with. Co-financing, so given that the project is funded 50% of total project budget, you have to find the other 50. And the way you would fund it would be through staff time, because you're paying people anyway, you're paying salaries, so you account that as your match funding. You could involve any third-party funding. You can also use revenue from sales of your product or of your technology within the project to match the grant. And this actually should revenue should be lower than 50% of project expenses. So this is meant to encourage people to sell as quickly as possible within the project and then use the revenues to match the 50%. And a few words on this year's call. It opened in May. Closing date is 5th of September, so a great way to spend your summertime. 5 o'clock, Brussels time. It's all electronic submissions, so no shifting around of papers. You all do it electronically. There's a new submission system called CIP, but the core application and the way you sort of maneuver in the system is pretty much the same as it was in the previous years. PIC, which is Participant Identification Code, is mandatory this year. Now, what that means, and there's a slide, I think, on that. PIC is a code. If you've ever taken part in FP7 project, you will have PIC code. That's essentially an ID code for your organization in Europe. So when you put that code, they will put it in the system, they know who you are. So you don't have to repeat all your legal information every time. You will need that code under Horizon 2020 if you ever want to apply for anything at all. So you might as well get it. It's a registration process, so literally 10 minutes of filling in an online form, and you get, within a week, you get the code back. And this is the link to registering for the code. But you will need it in the future, so you might as well just get it done sooner rather than later. So PIC is mandatory. This is the first year they've made it mandatory, so you have to make sure if you're involving partners that they all have that. Evaluation is normally end of the year, beginning of following year. So funding decisions are normally communicated around about end of February the following year, so February 2014 for us. And first projects would normally start in May. So that's the turnaround time that we're facing at the moment. And as I said, 50% funding rate of total eligible costs and maximum 3 years duration of project. I should probably add that typically we're looking at sort of between 3 and 5 European partners per consortium. That seems to be the absolute average sort of number of partners that people tend to involve. You can go below that, you could go over that, but bear in mind, as an SME, you might not want to complicate your life by having too many partners. So there's a few sources of information, and the Center for Global Eco-Innovation is obviously one of them, very good one. You can go to the European website, which has got lots of useful information in terms of the call for proposals and how to apply, what to do, but also monthly newsletters. They also offer pre-screening, maximum 2 pages summary of your proposal, can go directly to project officers for them to check and see whether the project is eligible or not. There is a link to the submission system there as well and the project database, so it's always a good idea to have a look and check what sort of projects have been funded in the past, and if they're similar to yours, how you can make your project stand out. National contact point is, as the name suggests, obviously a national point of contact for you in terms of the program, and I offer quite a lot of information pre-screening as well. So I've got a form which has got 5 questions to decide whether the project is eligible or not. Partnering opportunities, application supports, including feedback on draft bids. I do all of that. Knowledge transfer networks, you've got a number of transfer networks funded by Technology Strategy Board, which provides, in particular, partnering opportunities for UK and abroad. And they're quite a good network to team up with. And that's all available on the _connect website. Enterprise Europe Network, which is another network of support centres to businesses, which is funded by European Commission to help businesses with partnering, with information, and that's for partners mainly in Europe. And of course, let's not forget the Centre for Global Eco-Innovation. As I've mentioned, they are pretty switched on in terms of what the opportunities are and how to help people. You've got partners such as Inventia who are commercialization experts, so you might want to draw on their expertise and experience in that respect. That's my blog on the _connect website. If you want to get notifications and just be on top of what's happening, you might want to either link to me or just drop me an email, and I'll put you as a contact on there. Just a few more slides in terms of what a national contact point, how it sits within the structure. So that's essentially support funded by Technology Strategy Board, and in my case, DEFRA as well. So my aim or my focus is to improve UK participation, but mainly UK success ratio in the programme. And that's the reason why it's so important, because 59% of all applicants are completely new to European funding, have never done anything before with European funding. So it's quite important to provide a lot of hand-holding and support to them. This is our performance in the programme so far. So we took a bit of a dip this year, but still much better than the rest of Europe, I would say. We're probably the most successful country at the moment in terms of getting the projects funded. Now, just a few slides on why proposals fit or don't fit and where they fall short, because that's always interesting kind of statistics that you might want to see. Most projects don't fit because they've got energy focus. And so I can't stress enough how important it is to just check with me whether your project is eligible or not. If it only focuses on energy, then it won't be eligible. If you're looking at energy as one of the aspects of resource efficiency, then it's probably within the scope. Innovation is the other element, so it's either projects which are still research development kind of activities, or it's projects that are already selling on the market and they're trying to sort of fit into the program. Projects are good, they're good, but they normally need much more quantification and definition in terms of market uptake. That seems to be the same situation every year that we're facing, that companies are not very good at describing the market potential of their product or technology. So that seems to be the main drawback. Environmental impacts, essentially what it boils down to is quantification. So how you're able to define and quantify and then subsequently measure your environmental impact. Rejected, majority are rejected on innovation and environment award criteria. So essentially it either doesn't fit environmentally or it's just simply not innovative enough. And majority of these cases are actually not described sufficiently. I've never actually heard of anyone complaining or any assessor complaining of a project with too much information or too much data. That doesn't happen. There's normally insufficient amount of information and data, so just bear that in mind when you write generally any application, that it's always lack or it's almost always lack of information rather than lack of real innovation in the project. Recommended proposals, so the element that's almost always negotiated is the budget, as we know, of course. Market uptake in terms of quantifying, so defining the number of sales or the volume of sales or number of contracts to be achieved at the end of the project tends to be the element most negotiated. And this is, again, just to sort of make sure that you remember it, NCP support, program information and guidance, regular information updates, project eligibility check. If you want to check, either catch me today during the day or drop me an email or call me to just double check. Don't apply without checking your eligibility. Information days, application writing workshops where we spent, today in the afternoon we're doing a sort of half-day application writing workshop, which should hopefully give you a good idea of, what you're supposed to write and how to prepare your application. But normally we spend a full day going through examples of applications and other things, just to make sure that you go away with a very clear idea in your mind. And those workshops are at the moment 100% success rate. We haven't had a single failure over the last 3 years, so they seem to work. One-to-one support and advice, feedback on draft bids, and also support during contract negotiations and project kickoff. I wish my boat was a bit more fancy than that, but couldn't find a better photo. Take advantage of the help. It's free, it's confidential, and it's worth it. So where to start? First of all, you need to check that your project is eligible. Once we establish that, we look at planning out how you're going to prepare your application. And we plan how I'm going to help you do that. I don't write, but I do quite a lot to help. I'll be running an application writing workshop on the 26th of June in London. I'm also planning a financial management of eco-innovation projects in September, and that's for new projects or ongoing projects, eco-innovation projects. And also a subsequent event on funding opportunities on the Horizon 2020, because as I said, the program will continue with much larger budgets, so it's worth to know what will happen in the future. Thank you very much.